Rishi Sunak called yesterday's budget one for a stronger economy, with more money promised for the NHS, for education and skills training, and for local government too. But it's when the details start to emerge that we really find out what those figures really mean for us and for Norfolk as well. Well, we're joined now by the Northwest Norfolk, I should say, Conservative MP James Wild. Good morning to you, Mr. Wild.
Good morning, Rob.
Great to have you with us. You've been campaigning constantly for a new hospital in King's Lynn recently. Has there been any hint that any of that extra money for the NHS will secure a replacement for the Queen Elizabeth Hospital?
Well, there was confirmation yesterday of over £4 billion to fund a new hospital building programme. QEH is bidding to be one of the 8 extra hospitals that the government's committed to. And they put in their bid last month, and we're now waiting to see if we get through the first stage, and then there'll be a second stage with a final decision due to be announced in spring. As you'll imagine, I'm talking to the Health Secretary, pestering him, talking to the Chancellor and others to make sure that we have the best chance to be on that list.
And how good are the chances, do you think?
Well, it's a compelling case. It's got the most number of props of any hospital in the country holding up the roof. The lifespan of the building is more than a decade longer than it was planned for, and that's having an impact on the ability of staff and to give treatment to patients. And it's not an ideal situation. So the need is obvious, and we just need to make that compelling case and come up with a proposal that fits the bill in terms of the government funding envelope.
Mm-hmm. Well, elsewhere, tourism is, of course, very important to us here in Norfolk. Many businesses, as well as bars, cafes and restaurants, will welcome the news that business rates will be halved for a year, but they're not happy that VAT is still set to go up, back to 20%. Has the Chancellor done enough, do you think, to help hospitality, which, of course, has had a terrible 18 months for obvious reasons?
It has. It's a very important part of my constituency. A fifth of all jobs are in the hospitality leisure sector, and there has been a lot of support that's been put in place through grants, through the cut in VAT first to 5% and then to the 12.5%, which carries on through to April. I understand why businesses want that to continue. I think what the Chancellor's done is given a 50% cut in business rates for all those pubs, restaurants, cinemas, the leisure attractions, all the areas around the coastline and in the countryside that will be worth around £7 billion in total for businesses. So that is a significant move. And we all need to get out and support those businesses. And we've seen this summer lots of people coming to Norfolk to visit here in staycation and talking to the sector, talking to the hoteliers. They've got bookings through next summer already. So I think the position's looking more positive, and I think this extra support on business rates will help.
Yeah, and a lot has been made of the cut of to beer duty. It's on quite a few of the front pages, different viewpoints on that. But earlier we heard from drinkers and a couple of small brewers in Norfolk who don't think it will make much difference. Will we see the price of a pint actually come down, or will this just help the bigger breweries?
Well, there's going to be an immediate freeze in the duties for beer and other drinks. But what's exciting, something I supported, was this new draft beer duty that will cut the rate by 5%. That's going to be consulted on, will come in from 2023, but that will help our pubs compete against the supermarkets. So I think that will make a difference, and I'm sure people at the beer festival in Norwich this weekend will be raising a pint to the Chancellor.
Yeah, well, the Chancellor has made changes to universal credit as well, which means many claimants should get more of their money, and the minimum wage is going up as well, of course. But so is the cost of living. We know that, and taxes are the highest they've been in 70 years. I mean, you've said this budget will help working families. Is that really the case?
Yeah, the changes that are being made to universal credit will mean that people can keep more of the money that they're earning, so that the benefit doesn't get cut so severely as it does at the moment. So that will potentially be worth £1,000 a year for people on average. The Chancellor talked about an example of a couple, one working full-time, the other part-time, who will be better off by £1,800 a year. So that is a difference, and it's right that we focus these cuts in tax on the lowest paid people who, with rising energy costs and other pressures, are under pressure. So it's right to do that, and we're also going to be increasing the national living wage from April next year, going up to £9.50. And that now applies to people aged over 23 rather than just people aged over 25 that it did previously. So these are tangible steps. Have also frozen fuel duty. Anyone living in Norfolk, having a car is not a luxury. You need it to get around. So that's an important step, which will also help people with the cost of living pressures. The other thing is the economy is growing, which is set to grow by 6.5% this year. There are 1 million job vacancies in the country. Talking to businesses in my constituency in northwest Norfolk, they're desperate for staff to hire people. So there are jobs also available out there. So things are looking up. The economy is recovering, and that's why we're able over the next spending review period to put £150 billion into schools, into the health service, into more police and tackling crime and the things that people are really worried about.
Yeah, well, last night Rishi Sunak met with backbench Conservatives to try and reassure them that those taxes will go down. Did you feel reassured?
Yeah, I was at the meeting. And it's important to note that spending is going to go up by 3.8% above inflation over the next period of this spending review. That's £150 billion investment. But ultimately, we need to grow the economy. We need to support businesses, which is why there's measures in here to help businesses invest as a business rate cut, because that's how we generate the funds for public services. And as we grow the economy, it's right that people are able to keep more of the rewards of their hard work to support themselves and their families. So there's a big boost going into public spending here. But as a Conservative, I certainly believe in lowering taxes on people when it's prudent to do so.
We need to mention the COP26 climate summit as well. It begins next week. Lots of people talking about this, and the UK government, of course, hosting it, and he's telling all countries to cut their carbon emissions. But yesterday, the government announced that the air passenger duty is being lowered for domestic flights. That doesn't seem to send the right message, does it?
Well, I think this is important in terms of regional airports, obviously including Norwich. At the moment, there's an extra tax that people have to pay, and this will help improve connectivity in some of the poorest parts of the country. My colleagues down in Cornwall and other places have certainly been lobbying for this, and I think most of the emissions that come from flights are from international flights, and the Chancellor's also introduced a new measure, so the longer that you fly internationally, the more that you have to pay in passenger duty. So I think you have to look at all these things in the round. We've published a swathe of documents and proposals about measures to deliver. On net zero, last week it was about how we can get lower carbon heating into people's homes using heat pumps and other technologies. So there's a whole plethora of things going on. There's investments going into new technologies, a new approach to nuclear power stations so that we can get more of those built so that we're less reliant on gas from Russia and other unstable parts of the world. So there's big investments going into net zero. But we can also do that in a way that we continue to grow our economy. We cut our emissions, I think, over the last 20 years by about 40-odd%, whilst growth went up by about 70%. So growth and tackling climate change can go hand in hand, but that's a very important agenda for my part of Norfolk and around the coastline, with coastal erosion and other issues that we need to tackle.
Just one more question for you, James Wild. £4.8 billion has been promised to councils. The Conservative leader of Norfolk County Council says he was hoping for clearer detail on what budget would mean for the local authority. He said he'd like to know if the council will be put on a more sound financial footing or if there'll have to be more large council tax rises. Do you have any idea what councils in Norfolk will be getting?
Well, I talked to Andrew quite a lot, as you can imagine, and also to Andrew Jimison, the finance lead for the authority. And what they've been calling for, and I've been calling for, is for a long-term settlement and clarity. So they know what they're going to be getting over the spending review period. It's total for an extra 1.6 billion a year across councils. Michael Gove, the local government lead, will be setting out the detail of what that means for councils in the local government settlement, which will be coming in the next month or so, I would imagine. So they'll get the detail there. But the big picture here is it's the biggest increase in a decade for local government. And I hope that Norfolk gets a good share of that. I've been working with my other Conservative colleagues to make the case for Norfolk, because we do face particular pressures as a very rural county, not least in the costs that it takes to get people to school, for example, where quite a lot of the education funding gets sucked up into that rather than actually supporting pupils. So it's good news for local government. I heard he's also welcomed the extra funding for special educational needs. And there's also big investments in broadband and other areas where Norfolk is already set to benefit. So I'll keep making the case with my colleagues to make sure that Norfolk gets its fair share. And if we can get a bit more than our fair share, even better.
Thanks very much, James Wild, the Conservative MP for North West Norfolk. More on the